Greetings, distinguished guests. I am Teranz, and welcome back to more Werewolf Heart of the Forest. Uh, so last time I did quit at a point, and I think I've already done kind of part of this, so let's go. I was glad to see him. Bartek, I waved to him and smiled. Sorry I missed you earlier. Maia, what are you doing here? He blurted out with surprise when he saw me. I was sure you were coming on the later bus. We started walking and talking. His accent was broad and Eastern European. Anya liked him. Anya took an immediate liking to him. I could tell. I could always smell romance in the air. We walked along the only street in the village, nearing the center, if you could call it that. Every house had a garden, and the air was dense with the fragrance of flowers. I took a deep breath. Goal, family. So, did you manage to trace the name I gave you? Bartek shook his head. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Sorry, he was avoiding my eyes. A trickle of sweat ran down his temple. Balance. He was clearly lying to me, but why? Come on, man. I said, you wrote to me you found something. You just clammed up. You know what? I think you should drop it. I stopped and unleashed all my charm. I think I'm making different decisions than last time, but I am okay with that. Also, there we go. I turned to Bartek and looked him right in the eyes. I put a hand on his chest. I really had no plan after that part, so I panicked and felt an urge to do something unnecessary and over the top. Looked him deep in the eyes. I leaned towards him and looked him deep in the eyes. I hoped he'd see how important it was to me, but he just blanched and jerked back. I didn't give up. Tell me what you found, I asked, not giving up. The game tracks her decisions and how Maia approaches problems that will accumulate and gradually reveal what kind of person she is deep in her heart. The story changes to reflect Maia's personality. Alright. Well, he brushed his forehead with the back of his hand. I did ask. I started with the old people here. I told him that my friend from the States was looking for her roots. Oh, sorry about that. Alright. Even though I'm probably gonna edit that out, so I don't know why I said that. Anyway. And want to know about the place her family came from. You know the drill. At first, people were very, receptive. I waited for the other shoe to drop. And then I mentioned your name. He shook his head. I urged him to continue. Bartek, no dramatic pauses, please, I urged him. Tension is killing me. One of the old men here told me to go to hell, the other spat on the ground, and his wife crossed herself. For a moment, he looked younger and smaller. Then my own grandmother told me to stop asking. She said something else as well. I tensed up. What? I asked. She told me to pray for you. Suddenly, the sweet golden afternoon wasn't so sweet anymore. That piqued my interest. I knew there was something weird and twisted connecting me and my family to the forest. I could feel a shiver run down my spine. We walked in silence, but my mind was in overdrive. People didn't want to talk, and that can only mean one thing. It's on the right track. My pulse quickened, and I tensed up like a hound that smelled blood. I was on the right track. Every time you learn or do something significant that brings you closer to your goal, you'll gain willpower. Alright, it's ready to see some sights. Time to see the sights, I nodded at Bartek. Show me everything this place has to offer. Walked through the village, bathed in the sharp rays of the summer sun. It was a lazy afternoon, disturbed only by the occasional passing car throwing up clouds of dust that hung in the air long after the vehicle was gone. Anya was walking close to Bartek, asking him about every little detail of the village. detail in the village. People were relaxing or working in their yards. Dogs were barking, and every cat we passed froze to look at us. People went about their day, though giving us wary stares from time to time. Why the stares? Don't people like strangers here? I asked, still feeling the angry gaze of some random woman on my back. What's everyone's deal? They don't, he admitted. I was curious why. Why, I asked candidly. It's complicated, Bartek scratched his neck, embarrassed by the topic. There's a small conflict around the force, and it's attracting some weird people. Activists, reporters, bored rich kids, he said as though his dad didn't own multiple businesses. People like that, and they're getting on the locals' nerves. I noticed Anya frowning. Anya looked skeptical. I looked the conflict up online, she said, and it didn't look so small. It looked pretty important, actually. For a moment, Bartek looked like he was at a loss for words. Well, you're not one of those crazies, and you're like almost local, he smiled. So what would you like to see in the village of your ancestors? He spread his arm as if to show me all the splendor the village had to offer. What do you suggest? Cats were watching my every move as locked along the empty seats. Let's go to the old cemetery. So we have quite a few churches here, Bartek explained as we walked down the road. 2 Orthodox, 1 Catholic, and even 1 Baptist church, he said as if it were something uncommon. And a synagogue? I knew a part of my mom's family was Jewish. He shifted his weight uncomfortably. There aren't any Jews here anymore. Any Lutheran churches? I don't think so, Bartek shook his head as he led us to a small wooden church surrounded by a cemetery. Anyway, even though we have all these churches, there's only one cemetery. The church was Orthodox, but the graves were of a mishmash of styles and faiths. Catholic, Orthodox, atheists, everyone resting together. Bartek looked like he didn't approve. This place reminded me of a forest or something poetic about it. I want to keep my rage at 2 right now, so this place reminded me of a forest. It's like in the forest, I said, looking at the spruces among the graves. It's full of death. What's fallen stays where it fell. There's all kinds of trees, bushes, and animals, and life is growing out of all of it. Bartek didn't look convinced. Yeah, maybe. He looked at the cemetery. For a moment, he seemed lost in his thoughts. All of my family lies here, he said. I mean, the ones that are dead. Hey, what do you think? What do you think happens when you die? Left an echo. You echo for some time, or ripple, I think that everything in this world has a trace. I was looking for the right word. Aura, an aura, emanation, call it what you want. It doesn't dissolve right away. Bartek seemed unsure. Is that like a new age thing? He looked over the cemetery fence. Well, anyway, this is it. Spiritual heart of the town. Go see something else if you like. So that's where we stood. I wanted to go in, and he was clearly scared to let me enter the cemetery. I went in. Are you kidding me? I didn't come here to look at something. I came here to look for something, I said, opening the gate. Bartek shifted uncomfortably. I don't know if that's a good idea. He was hiding something. You found it. My family grave. Maybe? So what are we waiting for? Anya smiled at him. He mumbled something and led us through the labyrinth of graves to the far end of the cemetery. We continued. Balanced. The walkways were narrow, and I could tell Bartek was having a hard time finding the way. It wasn't that he was stalling, he just genuinely wasn't sure where to go, especially when we got to the older part of the cemetery. At some point, We saw a woman, tall, broad-shouldered, and long-legged, with gray dreadlocks pinned to the crown of her head. She must have been in her late 40s or early 50s. She was marching through the walkways with fury in her eyes. Bartek quickly stepped between the graves to get out of her way. I didn't move. I didn't see any reason to move out of someone's way, so I didn't. Are you lost? I asked the woman in Polish, looking at me with surprising concern. Asked her for directions. Actually, I'm looking for an old grave, I said. My family lived here, and what's the name? Uh, for the I'm not um I'm gonna butcher that. So I answered with a Polish perfect accent. Young. She's an antiquated feminine form of the name. She shook her head. I'm just coming from there. Go to the end here, turn left, and go to the far corner of the wall. She looked at me in a funny way. I thanked her. Oh, thank you. Bartek didn't seem to know the way. I think it was only then that she noticed him. Oh, it's you, she said with barely hidden disdain. Well, I better be going. See you around, I guess? With that, she left, followed by Bartek's hostile gaze. I asked Bartek about her. Who was that? I asked, watching the old woman leave. Bartek winced. Well, that's Olga. She's a local activist. She left when she was 18 or something and returned a few years back with the notion that she was going to change this place. We continued to the far corner of the cemetery. There, seemingly forgotten and covered in moss, was a lonely grave. It was damaged. The tombstone was broken, deliberately. Someone obviously smashed it with a hammer. The name was half erased. The plaque was also damaged. Someone had tried to scratch out the name, but the letters were still visible. There was a circle around the grave. There was a circle of coarse salt around the grave. I'm sorry, Bartek sighed. I didn't want you to see that. I look around carefully. I look around the scene. The circle around the grave was broken, and the disturbed soil where someone had kicked this fresh salt away. I felt overwhelmed and confused. What was going on here? How dare they? I had no idea who they were, but how dare they desecrate my family grave? Anya squatted and stared at the plaque. I can't read. Can't read it. The letters are all wrong. She glanced at Bartek. Is it Russian? Belarusian. The same letters, different language. He explained there were a lot of them here before the war. I looked at Bartek, hoping for some context. Bartek put his hand in his pockets. So you don't know anything about your dad's side of the family? He asked me cautiously. Whatever happened at least 70 years ago, and someone still remembers. That was absurd. Remember what? I push him. These people have been dead for almost 100 years, and what fucking harm could they do 6 feet underground? Hey, he yelled, regaining his balance. Are you insane? I haven't done anything, for fuck's sake. Straightened his t-shirt. Let's go. I shouldn't have brought you here in the first place. Girl, you need therapy. Anya shot me a disapproving glance and ran after Bartek. I'll still look at the grave. I looked at the grave for the last time. My family name looking strange, written in the unfamiliar Belarusian letters. As we were leaving, I was thinking, I was onto something. There's something unnatural about my family, and me coming to the village has stirred some old demons. I just had to find out what my ancestors were doing there, who they were. The day was hot and beautiful, yet I couldn't stop thinking about the devastating rain. Lost hope, strange dreams, over the village center. Let's go to the railway. Bartek wants to show us the most picturesque spot in the area, Anya said. Maybe that's not the right word, he said, frowning. Well, it's not like it's beautiful, but it has, an atmosphere, a climate, ambiance? Ambiance, Anya and I said at the same moment as we laughed. Ambience, Bartek smiled, visibly relieved. I meant ambiance. We ended up on some abandoned tracks. We soon left the village behind and ended up on some abandoned railway tracks. The perfect place to meet a serial killer, I grumbled, looking at the overgrown tracks disappearing among the trees. But with the slow winding river a stone's throw away and the long drooping branches of the old trees shading the unused railway, the place really was picturesque. The bees buzzed around us, the birds sang like there was no tomorrow, and the fragrance of herbs hung thick in the air. My head was spinning. I was bursting with energy. Let's race to the trees, I shouted. Before they could react, I was already running. It was an easy win. I want to save the willpower just in case. I started with a jog and gradually sped up, but they never caught up with me. It was only when the shadow of the trees engulfed me that I stopped and looked back. Bartek and Anya were way behind, walking at a leisurely pace, talking and laughing. Jerks. Felt someone watching. Heard a noise and turned around. A woman was standing among the trees. She didn't look surprised to see me. She was stunned. The woman looked like she was in her late 30s and was the most beautiful person I'd ever seen. She had a perfect hourglass figure, long braids, and the most stunning cheekbones. Her eyes, slightly slanted, were a weird shade of blue, almost deep purple. They seemed familiar, and she was looking straight at me. Her eyes were hypnotizing. I stood there, transfixed. She smiled. I'm Lisa, she said, looking at Anya and then again at me. You must be Bartek's pen pal, I assume. The one who's searching for ancestry? Exchanged pleasantries. Lisa asked whether I liked it here and what I'd seen and how long we were planning to stay. Since we're alone, I have some advice for you, she said, looking at the way I'd come. Don't get too attached to your friends there. It won't last. I didn't know what to say, so we just stood there looking at one another. Do you mind if I join you? She asked when Bartek and Anya approached. Sure, I didn't mind. Sure, I smiled. I was about to forage for some plants in that direction. She lifted the basket she was holding in her hand. We walked the narrow path. The path was too narrow for all of us to walk together, so at some point I found myself walking with Lisa. She would squat from time to time, collecting some herbs. So you're looking for your roots, she said after a while. Why? I couldn't resist the mystery. My mom is hiding something from me, I answered, and I can't resist a mystery. Sit down with me. She nestled among the roots of an old tree, reached in her basket, and took out a blunt. Let's have a smoke and I'll tell you a story. She noticed when I hesitated. I needed to hear it. Took the blunt. Tangled roots. Lisa let out a cloud of smoke and started talking. What I learned from Bartek's grandma, you were asking the wrong questions about the wrong people. I'll lose a rage. I closed my eyes and just went with the story. This is a tainted land, girl, she continued. So much blood was spilled that the Puzessa almost lost her mind. Uh, Gisessa was one of those words for forest. Polish had lots of those, but she used it in a weird way. Why do you call the forest that? Isn't lost the right word? I call her that because it's her proper name, she huffed. Lost is to that. It's what dog is to a wolf, domesticated, enslaved, used. That is a primeval force, one untouched by humans, primal, strong, and feared. There was admiration in her voice, and I realized that's the word. I realized that the word sounded like the rustle of leaves, like the wind. Pushcha. Anyway, as I was telling you, the forest almost went mad, and it's not wise to wake those spirits, especially not now. What spirits? You mean the dead? I asked. She looked at me with those uncanny eyes. Her gaze was almost unbearable, hard with anger, smoldering somewhere deep within it, ready to jump at my throat. And then suddenly, something changed. She sighed heavily. You have no idea, do you? About what? What do you mean? I asked. So you have no idea who you are, she stated. Nobody told you what it was like here during the war and after it. Her eyes lost focus as though she was looking at something only she could see. In 1939, when the war broke out, first came the Germans, then the Russians. You know, they actually worked together. Stalin never forgot that he was beaten by the Poles in 1920. Shot me a glance. Nodded politely. I didn't really care, but I nodded politely. Oh, you have no idea what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter, really. She took a drag. Anyway, millions of lives later, Stalin and Hitler stopped sleeping together, so to speak, and the Germans came. Then the Russians again. And then there were the forest soldiers. The forest part got my attention. I nodded so she would continue. The forest part got my attention. They started as Polish soldiers. When the war ended and They started as Polish soldiers, but when the war ended and they became guerrillas to fight the Russian occupation, and then they ended up as desperate bandits, she sighed. For the people who lived here, they're all the same. Germans, Russians, forest soldiers. They killed, they maimed, they tortured, they burned villages. It didn't matter what language she spoke. She looks sad. I'm sorry. I touched her arm. I didn't know that was also tangled. My great-grandparents were from here, she sighed. After the war, there were some changes, and my whole family was sent to Siberia to die. My grandmother was the only one who survived. She met a Buryat shaman, and here I am. But your story is tangled with all of this, she looked straight at me. Have you ever wondered what your grandfather did during the war? Then the weed hit me. And of course, that was the moment when the weed finally hit. That stuff was powerful. And for a moment, I wondered if she hadn't spiked it. I tried to stay focused. I focused and understood that the strange feeling came from within, like a forgotten dream, like an ancient memory. Suddenly brought to life, I let it in. We are sitting around the fire deep in the forest. The others are sleeping. I listen to the whisper of the leaves. The forest is speaking to me, demanding action. Wants me to be its revenge. I understand what has to be done, and I can't wait to be the forest's revenge. I wake the others and tell them the plan. Tomorrow we're going to burn a village. I sit by the fire and listen to the wolves howling to the moon, weeping for their slain brothers and sisters. Then the vision ends. Alright, I'm going to call it here because this episode's getting a little bit longer than I was hoping. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time with more Werewolf Heart of the Forest.